Hey, what is up guys? Murgyman4 here, back with another Doctor Who Series 10 review, and oh man, where does 12 weeks go? Series 10 is officially over. That went by just like that, and now we have to wait another 6 months for another Doctor Who episode, which is terribly sad, but Series 10 is concluded, and you know what? That was a pretty good series overall. I'm going to make a separate video in maybe 1 or 2 weeks where I'm going to be talking about Series 10 overall. And so of course today's video is focusing solely on the Doctor Falls and a little bit on World Enough in Time because of course it's a two-parter. And yeah, so what did I think of the Doctor Falls? Well, it did not live up to World Enough in Time in my opinion, but that doesn't mean it was a bad episode. Far from it. I thought it was still a very strong episode overall. It did focus on character more than plot, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is a little bit disappointing after the incredible plot setup that we had in World Enough in Time. And I think that a lot of the elements to it were really good. I think my main issue with the episode is the way that the different elements were pieced together. And something that I was preparing myself for was another Hellbent scenario, which thankfully we didn't get. I really don't like Hellbent. I really liked Face the Raven, I loved Heaven Sent, and Hellbent, I despise that episode. And it managed to become my least favorite episode of Doctor Who. Keep in mind that I have seen every single Doctor Who episode, including reconstructions of the missing episodes, from An Unearthly Child until present, and it has managed to be at the very, very bottom. So, yeah, and you get an idea of what I think of that. And so, the Doctor Falls had enough setup to become another Hellbent, but thankfully Stephen Moffat delivered. But anyways, another thing is, usually with my reviews, I go through them in chronological order of the episode. With the Doctor Falls, because it's more character-based than plot-based, I feel like its structure lends more towards if I analyze different elements as opposed to the chronological order of things, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go through different sections and different categories and just talk about those separately. And so first things first, I'm just going to talk about the setting a little bit, which is pretty different from what we see in World Enough in Time. We do get a bit of time on the lowest floor as we spent with Bill in the last episode, but the majority of the time is on floor 507, which, of course, while still on the spaceship, isn't really that kind of spaceship environment. And so last episode, we had heard of these colonists that had gone up to floor 507 but never returned. Here we see what happened to them. They just decided to stay because it was a much nicer place. And so the tone of the episodes too shifts drastically. I haven't had the chance to watch both episodes back to back yet, but even just watching them with a week's separation, the tone feels a little bit jarring to have such a change, because the last episode is just dark and creepy and just chilling overall. Here we don't get that. It's more of, I would say like a war kind of atmosphere as opposed to, you know, like kind of body horror, which is a bit disappointing because I really like that. I think that kind of atmosphere that was established in World Enough in Time is what makes the Cybermen so scary. And so that atmosphere here, it's unfortunate to see that change. It works well within the episode itself, but as a part of the story as a whole, I think it's a bit of a jarring change and doesn't serve the villains nearly as well. But once again, for the purposes of this episode, I think it's good. Anyways, because this is character-based, pretty much all my analysis is going to be on the characters. I'm going to talk about the Cybermen first. Obviously, they're not the only foes in this episode, although the Masters don't really get too much of time to shine as a villain. But of course, the Cybermen were a big part of the advertisements for this episode, and they do play that villain role. But as I said, the atmosphere just does not lend to the Cybermen. I loved what they did with World Enough in Time with the Cybermen. You could not replace the Cybermen with another villain in World Enough in Time. It had the same effect. Unfortunately, we do not get that here. They become very generic, attack the innocent people villains. They don't really do much. They're just kind of there to be a threat and to be killed. So that's really unfortunate. Because honestly, with the exception of Bill, you could replace the Cybermen with any other monster and really it wouldn't make any difference, which is just a massive shame because that's one of the reasons I loved World Enough in Time so much. The way that the Cybermen are portrayed in the Doctor Falls is how they're usually portrayed in the new series, and so that's why World Enough in Time was such a breath of fresh air, because of that portrayal that could only be the Cybermen, but here they're back to being generic monsters, and it's just, it doesn't work as well. They're fine as a background threat. I'm not complaining that it's the Cybermen that they've chosen to use, that's perfectly fine. It's just disappointing that they reached such high potential last episode, and then it just dropped in this episode. So that's a bit disappointing. And also, of course, throughout the episode we get to see a couple different evolutions of the Cybermen. This was something that I was speculating would happen. It's not quite how I imagined it would go down. When we first see the Nightmare and Silver version Cyberman, Bill asks why is it different, and the Doctor responds that they've created a special battle variation to go up there. And so here's the thing I don't really grasp about it. I don't see the point of having the new Cybermen in it. It doesn't really make sense to me. Yeah, I get they make a battle variant, but if you have a battle variant, later we see the Cybus, the Nightmare and Silver, and the Mondasian Cybermen all up there at once. So if you're making a specific battle variant, why are you sending the non-battle versions up there as well? Like, why have multiple versions? I guess they definitely would have wanted to get more use out of the Mondasian Cybermen suits, but if that was the case, why not just have the Mondasian Cybermen? I don't see the point. I mean, the other thing too is the Cybus Cybermen. I know they aren't actually Cybus, but it's the same design. There's no point to them at all. I can at least understand a little bit with the Nightmare and Silver ones. That's not too bad, but the Cybus ones are completely pointless. There's no reason for them to be there at all. So that just doesn't sit too well with me. It's not terrible. At least there is a decent explanation for newer models being there, because of course time has passed exponentially down at the bottom floor, while it's been a couple of weeks for them up at floor 507. And so they've had time to develop like that, but I don't know why they even bothered when you're having the multiple models at once. Why not just keep one of them? Keep it consistent. It is a little bit weird for me. And on that point as well, the Mondasian Cybermen have a couple of changes. We see the Cybermen fly again, which was a big complaint that people had in Death in Heaven. I didn't really mind it with the Nightmare and Silver Cybermen, because I'm like, okay, well, they're pretty advanced. So, I mean, why not? Yes, it makes them a lot more like Iron Man, and that's kind of dumb, but it's not terrible. But then in this episode we have the Cybus Cybermen and the Mondasian Cybermen flying as well, which, once again, sure, they have the technology with the most recent variant, so I guess that makes sense, but it's just, and we don't really see much of them flying, so it's not terrible, but it just felt like a pointless inclusion to me. Why even bother with that? It's just, especially when I've never heard anything good about the Cybermen being able to fly. I haven't heard anyone say anything good about that, so I feel like that was useless to include. But the Mondasian Cybermen also have a couple of different abilities. One of the things we see one electrocute the Doctor earlier in the episode, and this is a little bit weird. I mean, I guess, sure, why not? But obviously we've never seen a Cyberman, you know, like a Mondasian Cyberman do this before. So it's just a little bit weird to see this Cyberman just randomly give the Doctor a bear hug and start electrocuting him. And we see that this actually starts to trigger his regeneration. I don't know, it seems a little weird to just have that random ability out of nowhere and then you just never use it again. Especially because the Doctor's main regeneration seems to be triggered later when he gets actually shot. So why not just have the shooting? Why does he have to be like that at all? Why couldn't he just have been shot? Why electrocuted? I'm just not really sure. Maybe the shot would be more permanent and they needed something a bit more temporary, but then if it's more temporary, why did it trigger the regeneration? A little bit inconsistent. Yeah, it's not terrible, but it's a little bit iffy. Also, the guns on their heads, the laser guns. I appreciate the idea of that, but in the 10th planet, the little thing here on the stomach, that was used as a weapon. So why couldn't they just use that again? I get it's more bulky and stuff, but come on, you gotta change it up. Like, go old school again. They could have just done that and it would have been good. It's not, I mean, it's a decent idea coming out of the top of the head. I don't think it's bad. I don't mind it. It's a minor nitpick. I just wish they would have used the actual 10th planet Cyberman weapon, considering it's right there and it's not shown to have any function in the episode, besides activating the laser on the top. So, it's just minor nitpick. They could have made it a bit more accurate to the originals, but I mean, it is a different branch, so that's fine. Speaking of, I really like that they mentioned different branches of Cybermen. The Doctor mentions branches from Mondas, Earth, Telos, even Marinus, which, for those of you who don't know, that's not from the TV series, that's actually from a comic. Well, Marinus is from the TV series, from a story very early on in the first season called The Keys of Marinus, and they had these creatures called the Vord. And there's this comic story in Doctor Who magazine, I'm not sure when, but it had this origin story for the Cybermen where they actually evolved from the Vord. And so I like that they're referencing all these different origins for the Cybermen, saying that there's not one origin, there can be many origins, and that just, it fits really well with the Doctor Who universe, and it works really well, so good job on that, Moffat. I'm glad that you kind of cleared that up a bit, that was good. But yeah, overall, I am really glad that the Mondasian Cybermen were back. They were used excellently in World Enough in Time, not so much in The Doctor Falls, although I'll talk about Bill later. That was pretty good with Bill. But yeah, they seem pretty generic in this, and I don't know. They weren't necessary. And with our next villains, we have the Masters. The Master played by John Sim and Missy, with Michelle Gomez. I was really glad to have John Sim back. I really liked his Master, and actually Utopia, The Sound of Drums, and Last of the Time Lords was the very first Doctor Who story that I ever saw, and so John Sim's Master has a special place in my heart, and I was really glad to see him return. I really enjoyed him throughout this episode, and the on and off banter between Missy and the Master, I thought that was really good. Unfortunately, they don't really do much in the story itself, so I really enjoyed both of them, just they didn't really fit into the story. You could have easily had the story without either of them, and not much has changed. They're there for the season arc, and they do benefit the season arc greatly, but they don't exactly fit in this story. I mean, it's not, they don't feel like they're slapped in their last minute, they just don't feel necessary. And so it was really great to see John Sim back again, but he feels like it was a wasted use of his Master, and now we might not ever see him again. There's still the possibility, but we might not. And so this is hardly a bad final outing for Sim. He has some great stuff in here. It's just a bit disappointing to not have the Masters, especially since it's the very first multi-Master story on screen. I know Big Finish did one last year, but this is the first one on screen. It's a bit underwhelming. You'd think that, you know, they'd utilize the Masters a bit better, and they did this in the beginning scenes very well, with the interrogation of the Doctor. I thought that was really good, and I was just, it didn't deliver what I was expecting or what I was hoping for. I think that the Cyberman story and the two Masters story would have easily both been better served if they had been separate. Because even though this is an hour-long finale and it definitely needed the extra 15 minutes, I don't think there was a way that Stephen Moffat could have properly integrated both those villains into it to make it feel like the two Masters was necessary. So yeah, I'm kind of iffy on that. And so, I mean, I'm just glad that at least their inclusion is good. It's not detrimental to the story. I'll easily take useless to the story over detrimental to the story any day. And so, actually, that's what both the Masters and the Cybermen are. They both play a significant role in World Enough in Time, but in The Doctor Falls, both of them are kind of pointless, but neither of them are detrimental, so that's good. And I did enjoy the Masters a lot, so I would say they benefited the story more, but they weren't necessary to it. And there also were a couple of scenes where I thought were a little bit iffy, mainly the stuff where the Master is kind of attracted to himself. I'm like, okay, of course the Master is selfish, he really loves himself, you know, that makes perfect sense, but it's, you know, that's a little bit too far. Don't go that far, that's just, I don't want to even think about that. So I wish that kind of flirting wasn't really in the episode, because that's just not right. I mean, could you imagine if it was Roger Delgado and John flirting with each other? That just, no, it's not the way it works. I don't care if the new Master's a woman. They shouldn't flirt with each other. That's just not good. Okay, now I've talked about them in the story. Now as serving the series arc, they were actually really excellent. Obviously, Missy has been growing to become a better person, and she's proving here in this episode that she actually was becoming better. And I mentioned before that I was hoping it was all a ruse. I don't mind that it wasn't a ruse. I can kind of get behind that, because of course they were once best friends. And, you know, maybe Missy's just come to a point in her life where she realizes that she is just completely wrong. And you know what? I'm okay with that, especially as she's foiled by John Sims' master, who is just so utterly cold and evil and heartless. The way that he taunts Bill in the episode is just terrible. It's so unbelievably cruel. Just 10 years that they spent together, and he's, oh my word, and he has no remorse for what he's done. He's actually upset when he thinks that she's not suffering. And later the doctor gives this extremely rousing speech, you know, to try to encourage the masters to join him, and he's just like, guess what? I wasn't listening to you, ha! And then just walks off. It's fantastic! It's such a good foil to Missy, and John Sim played it so well. And of course the master story culminates in a fantastic way. They've decided by this point that they can go down to the master's TARDIS and try to escape, because they can't go to the Doctor's TARDIS because of the time differential. Then the Cybermen would definitely catch up with them, but they can go down and get to the Master's TARDIS, and here Missy and the Master are going to part ways, and so Missy decides to give the Master a goodbye hug, but it's a ruse, and she stabs him, and so now he's going to have to regenerate. Now this wasn't a shock to me. I had kind of imagined this happening before, not necessarily like this, but it was definitely a thought that I had when it was first announced that Missy and the Master would be meeting each other. I'm like, you know what? It would make sense if Missy caused the Master to regenerate. That would be such a Master thing to do. And of course that's what happens here. And so he accepts it. He's glad that she still has the sly skill to be able to do that so subtly. But he questions her as to why she's deciding that she's going to betray him and stand with the Doctor. And her response just gets him so angry. And this is another thing I really like. This is another reason why he's such a good foil. He does not accept that. To him, he would never, ever stand with the Doctor. And of course Missy, I also like this about her. She's not remorseful for the things that she did when she was John Sims' master, and like before that. She's not remorseful for that. She admits that she loved doing that, but she's just decided that now it's time for her to move on. And John Sims' master he can't accept that and just shoots her flat out dead, which did surprise me. And so I was really glad with the way that that ended. I thought that was a great way to cap off that arc, with having the masters kill each other. That's a pretty Master thing to do, and then just laugh their heads off about it. That was awesome. I loved that. Of course, it seems that Missy might not get out of this, because the Master tells her don't even bother trying to regenerate, because that was like the full blast. But that's definitely not the last we're going to see of the Master. It might be a few more years until he shows up again. I'm assuming that it'll be back as a he, because this is Michelle Gomez's last episode. She said that she's leaving with Peter Capaldi. She's not doing any more. And so I'm assuming it'll go back to being a he when he does return again. But I'm certain the Master will be back. I'm certain that this is not the end for the Master. I don't know how it'll happen, but that's a few years' time for Chibnall to figure out. But yeah, I thought this was a great way to end the Master in Moffat's era. That was really, really good. Alright, well now that we've spent all that time talking about the bad guys, let's talk about the good guys. Because not only did this episode have to culminate in the goodbyes of the Masters, but we say goodbye to Nardole, we say goodbye to Bill, and we start to say goodbye to the 12th Doctor. So, Nardole, let's talk about him. He was pretty good in this episode, didn't provide as much comic relief as usual, and once again he shows himself to be a pretty good computer genius. He's very practical in this, and he does a very heroic job of protecting the people in the village on floor 507. And yeah, when Nardole was first introduced in The Husbands of River Song, I thought he was a good comic relief one-off character. I never expected to see him again. And then it was announced he was coming back for a few episodes in Series 10, and I was annoyed at first because I was like, what? Why bring him back? Of all the people, he was a one-off character, a good one-off character, but not good for, you know, multiple episodes. He's not good at all. And then it was announced he was coming back as a Series 10 regular, and he's going to be in every episode, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. This is going to be pretty bad. And my fears were kind of started to be confirmed in the return of Dr. Mysterio, when he was pretty useless in that. He wasn't bad in the pilot. I admit he was pretty good. And then as the series went on, he actually really started to grow on me, and now by this point, I don't think, looking in hindsight, I don't think he was a necessary addition to the series. We could have had a very similar series without him, but I admit, I'm really glad that Nardole was along for the ride. I honestly am, and I'm gonna miss him. Seriously, I didn't think I'd be saying that. I'm gonna miss Nardole. I actually got sad when he was forced to leave by the Doctor. So I thought his exit, and I thought his goodbye scene with the Doctor was very powerful. He's trying to do the heroic thing, but he knows that he can't protect the people and be as good to the people as the Doctor can. But the Doctor forces him to leave to go with them so that he can be the one to blow up all the Cybermen and save the day and save everybody else. And I actually felt sad for Nardole leaving, and that was good. Good job. I never expected that. So I'm really glad that Nardole turned out to be a good addition to the series. I never would have thought that, but sad to see him go. And yeah, so I don't really have much to say about Nardole this episode, but I have a lot to say about Bill. So, the thing I was mainly worried about, that I was worried about a repeat of the Hellbent scenario, was that since Bill pretty much died last episode, that she was going to get magically revived, just like Clara and Hellbent. This especially would have bothered me because, you know, cyber conversion is like a permanent thing. And so I was really worried about that kind of thing happening. I didn't ever think it could be as bad as Hellbent, because my complaints aren't just with Clara in that, but that's not for this video. But anyways, from the majority of the episode, I thought that it was really clever that the way that they got around Bill being a Cyberman. So she remained a Cyberman throughout the vast majority of the episode, which I thought was really good. But they had her not quite processing that she was a Cyberman. And I thought that was a really clever idea to still give Pearl Mackie a lot of material to work with, while still retaining her fate and allowing those consequences to stick. So I was really happy about that throughout the episode. And the explanation for why she can still feel these emotions, why she can not recognize herself as a Cyberman, I mean, it wasn't great, but it was better than, oh, she has too much love. Like, it was much better than that. And thank goodness it wasn't like she was able to escape the cyber conversion because she had so much love, and the cyber conversion just kind of stopped. It's just, because that kind of stuff has happened before and it's just stupid. Here, I thought it was really neat how the Doctor explains that her time in the Lie of the Land, resisting the monk's influence, has allowed her mind to become strong enough to resist the influence of the cyber conversion, and so she doesn't quite register that she's a Cyberman until she's directly told. And so we get a couple of scenes with some really neat practical effects where it goes from her to becoming a Cyberman as she really is, and so that was really cool, and it gave a good way to still give Bill some humanity but keeping her fate, and so that was really well handled throughout the episode, I thought. And she decides to stay with the Doctor to blow up with the rest of the Cybermen, because if she can't be her, she doesn't want to live anymore, which I think is a pretty noble decision. But then comes the ending. She does get revived, which disappointed me, because Heather from the very first episode came back, the puddle creature that can go through all of time and space. And so she takes Bill out of the cyber suit and she gets revived, and they go back to the TARDIS, and then they can go and explore time and space forever. And it's not terrible. I think this one is better, a lot better than Clara's Resurrection and Hellbent for a couple of reasons. One, this was actually set up in Bill's very first episode, so we already have this kind of thing with the pilot, the Heather creature, established, and that did not happen with Hellbent. That just came out of nowhere in Hellbent, the way that Clara got revived. But here, this was established before, and it's not like there's a direct return to exactly the way she was. I feel like this is better because in my own head, I like to think that she's not actually still Bill as she was. I know that the Heather creature says that she can change her back, but for example, when we see her old cyber body drop, it clearly looks like there's still a body in there instead of you know, an empty suit. And of course that could just be a production thing, but I like to think that her body was still in there and that she really is dead, and this is kind of like an afterlife version of her, and she gets a happy ending and she's more of like a ghost kind of thing than anything. I mean, the Heather creature does say that she's not dead, but you know what? I feel like this is a lot more plausibly explained as a resurrection than the Clara one, and so I felt like this was more earned as well. This made more sense, and Bill deserved this ending more than Clara did. Personally, I still wish this hadn't happened. I just don't take as much of an issue with it as I might have if, say, the Doctor had figured out some way to reverse the cyber conversion. I can just settle it as Bill's consciousness was taken out of the cyber suit and out of her body and put into more of the puddle creature, so I'll just go with that. It's got a bit more leeway, and yeah, personally, I would have had Bill dying with the rest of the Cybermen, and that's that. But this is acceptable. It doesn't make me hate the episode, so it's fine. I thought that Bill was really a breath of fresh air. She's definitely my favorite Moffat companion, and maybe even my favorite New Who companion. It's just, I really liked her characterization. She felt really realistic and grounded to me. She felt like a real person that's relatable, and I thought that she was really entertaining. She seemed like a breath of fresh air, way more than like Clara or Amy did. And so I really enjoyed her as a companion. And yeah, I'm sad to not see her in another series, but at the same time, I honestly don't really care that she's not moving on, because we've already had 2 companions in a row that stayed for like 2.5 seasons. And so we haven't had a 1-season companion for a while, so I don't really mind that we're getting that again. So yeah, I really liked Bill as a companion. A bit disappointed we didn't get to see a bit more of her, but I think that her tenure as a companion was really good, and I thought that it was rounded off well. It began and rounded off really well, and I thought it was very good overall, so I'm happy that Stephen Moffat gets to go out on a high like that. Finally, of course, we can't talk about The Doctor Falls without the Doctor himself. Obviously, in this episode we get to see the beginning of his regeneration, and he really gets to go out a hero, which is fantastic. It's a very heroic episode for him, very emotional episode for him, having to deal with his arch nemesis slash best friend, literally both of him at the same time. The two sides. That was really interesting to see as well. But yeah, so it's definitely got some high emotional stakes for the Doctor. He's just lost everything. He loses Bill, he loses Nardole, he loses the battle to Missy. He basically sacrifices himself to stop the Cybermen. He's lost pretty much everything. And so it's got a high emotional toll. And Peter Capaldi does a stellar job with it. He's fantastic, and I'm going to really miss him as the Doctor. I'm glad we have one more episode with him, but I don't think it would have been too out of place to have him regenerate at the end of this episode. Really, I think the only reason he didn't regenerate here was because Stephen Moffat is writing the Christmas special. That's the only reason I can see why he doesn't regenerate here. His regeneration would have fit really well at the end of this story, so I don't know. We'll have to see how the Christmas special does. Obviously, he starts to regenerate from the shots of the Cybermen from the end, but, I mean, is that a continuation from the regeneration process from earlier, from the electrocuting Cybermen? But I don't really feel like the electrocution would be enough to start his regeneration. So, if he hadn't started to have the regeneration energy earlier, that would have been a lot easier. I'm just going to say he died from the Cyberman shot. But of course, he just blows up all the Cybermen, and he's almost dead. And Bill and the Heather creature move him to the TARDIS, and after they leave, he wakes up. And I really like this sequence here because it's a direct homage to the 4th and 5th Doctor's regenerations, where they saw images of their companions before they regenerated. Now this was a little bit different because it wasn't just 12's companions, it was all the new series companions, which I'm not a huge fan of that. Well, technically not all the new series companions, because it's missing like Rory, but I don't know how I feel about this. I really like the homage, but it feels jarring to me when you just have the new series companions. It's just, maybe it would have seemed out of place to have just the Peter Capaldi ones, because there weren't very many, but I hate when they do just the new series companions and don't reference any of the classic series companions. It would have obviously been too much to have all the classic companions, but just having the new series companions is weird to me. So I'm kind of split. I love what they did I just wish they would have done it a little bit differently. It feels like it's ignoring the classic series, which is odd considering the cliffhanger of this. But anyways, the Doctor, he's not dead yet. He's still starting to regenerate, and for whatever reason he refuses to regenerate. He says that he will not change again, never again. But why? I don't really know. There's nothing in this episode that really makes me think of why he wouldn't want to regenerate. Obviously he's not trying to like die by not regenerating. He still wants to keep living, but he doesn't want to change. But why? The 12th Doctor is not the kind of Doctor I would have expected to be so resistant to regeneration. I thought he would face it bravely and happily, kind of like the 9th Doctor did. That's the kind of regeneration I expected from him. Not... This is even worse than 10th Doctor refusing to go. So, I don't know, it doesn't really sit well with me, especially because he's starting to regenerate like crazy. Like, he's really far along in the process, and then he just stops it, saying no. So, it seems a little bit weird. As I said, he easily could have regenerated in this episode. They're just holding it until Christmas, I'm sure, because Stephen Moffat is writing the Christmas special. So, I think that's the only reason they're having him not regenerate. So, it feels a little bit weird to me, the way that it's kind of fit in like that to extend his time a little bit more. But okay, that's fine. He really should have regenerated here, but I'm not going to complain too much. But then we get the cliffhanger, which is the first Doctor is returning. Now, something that's a little bit weird is that this was rumored all the way back before Series 10 even started. Obviously there were different ways that he was rumored to return, like he was going to be in the vault, or I can't remember any of the other ones, but yeah, he's been rumored since before Series 10 began, and I'm just like, how do those rumors even start? The Christmas special didn't even start filming until, I think, 2 weeks before this episode aired. So, how do those rumors even begin? But we do have the first Doctor, presumably during the 10th planet, since he's paralleling the 12th Doctor, saying that he doesn't want to change because the whole thing's ridiculous. And yeah, we end with the first Doctor beating the 12th Doctor, and the first Doctor is played by David Bradley, because obviously William Hartnell is dead, and of course David Bradley played William Hartnell, and thus the first Doctor in An Adventure in Space and Time, and I'm excited for this. I'm just a little bit worried because to have a regeneration story as a multi-Doctor story as well, I'm worried that that will overshadow the 12th Doctor's regeneration, which I don't want it to do, but if it's handled well, this can be pretty exciting, and I'm sure that David Bradley can do a great job as the first Doctor. I think he's got the mannerisms really well down. Obviously he doesn't sound and look exactly like William Hartnell, but I mean, neither did Richard Hurndall in The Five Doctors, and I mean, what do you expect? The performance is the important part. So, yeah. Anyways, that is The Doctor Falls. So while The Doctor Falls didn't quite live up to World Enough in Time, it was still a very strong episode on its own, and I think overall it's probably my favorite series finale since the Pandorica opens in the Big Bang. And yeah, it wasn't really a letdown. So that was really good. It had a lot of great elements in it. It's just, my main complaints come from the fact that they didn't all mesh together fantastically. And so of course the plot is weak, but the characterization is really good. And yeah, we get the beginning of the 12th Doctor's regeneration, the exits of 2 companions and 2 masters, and it was a very exciting episode, and a really good conclusion to what was a very consistent series overall. But yeah, so I would give The Doctor Falls an 8 out of 10, which brings my series average to 7.75 out of 10. That is my final series average for Series 10, so certainly not bad at all. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to be rewatching the entire series and giving my thoughts on it overall, because as of this point I have not rewatched any episodes from Series 10 outside of the weekend in which they originally aired, and so I'm going to watch it all in one go and see what I think of the series as a whole, and see if my opinions on any of the episodes have changed after a little bit of waiting. But yeah, so another 6 months until Christmas. Of course I'm going to be back with another episode review for that, and it's very exciting. Very sad that we only have 1 episode left of Peter Capaldi's Doctor. I'm going to miss him a lot, but what a season to go out on. That was really good. A great send-off for Peter Capaldi and Stephen Moffat, I think. But yeah, so That's my review of The Doctor Falls. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please put in the comments below what you thought of The Doctor Falls. Did you love it? Did you hate it? And what did you think of Series 10 overall? Was it a great series? Was it a poor series? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Anyways guys, hope you guys enjoyed. Burgerman 4, over and out. I'll see you guys later.